something occurred to me just now as I was sitting here starting this video, that in this particular election, you have a situation where Sanders is surging. You've seen the polls. I've shown them to you over and over again, taking Iowa, New Hampshire. But you also have this weird thing of Biden. Between the two in the race, I think Biden is the one who's the most threat to Sanders. He may be falling in, certain polls in the beginning, and yes, there may be this thing of momentum, but in the South, he is going to clean house. And if Biden is in this race, meaning it's time for Biden to get the knock on the door. Now, if Biden gets the knock on the door, I guess the other person is probably Bloomberg. I have no belief at all that Buttigieg can exceed the first two states. Bloomberg is probably the person who's probably going to take that second place. The catch here is Bloomberg, I think, is weakest against Sanders. I know this sounds strange, but as long as Biden is in the race, Biden is always going to be a threat to Sanders. It's this kind of ideological divide within the context of the party. Bloomberg is a Republican that is running in a Democratic primary that is just so happened to be a billionaire, the exact argument that Sanders makes every time he steps on stage. This is Sanders' rally in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. It's a concert. They threw a concert. Full house. In fact, this was the largest rally that they've had of all the candidates in Iowa. This is Biden's rally. Biden has a guy stand up and say he lost his wife. And Biden says, we'll talk afterwards. And then when the guy wouldn't sit down, Biden said, I can see why your wife left you. There was another person who stood up that said, settle for Biden. Right here. They got the t-shirt. This is funny. Settle for Biden. And then he says, Biden will be the next Hillary of 2020. Now, I'm not a big fan of people interrupting rallies like that. Because you could destroy the entire political process of people trying to get their pitch out if everybody effectively does and interrupts the people who don't necessarily want to hear. So I don't think I'm down with that, especially if it's not, some hateful Nazi that's spewing nonsense. But a political rally, which is all this is. But I do agree with him. Biden is the next Hillary of 2020. Jordan Chariton was trying to get into a Biden rally in order to ask the question of Joe Biden. And big burly firefighters edged their way in and said, get back. They back up a little bit. Get back. They get back a little bit further. Now, they did this because Joe Biden is walking down a rope line and Jordan was going to try to ambush him with a question. And these guys
they're going to try to muscle us out of here, so be prepared.
So, yeah, that just happened. They just pushed him out the way. Get back. So somebody, look, you can look at this in a few ways, right? Somebody knew who Jordan Chariton was, and in knowing who Jordan Chariton was, they said, look, don't let that motherfucker ask a question. Jordan was the one that went to Donna Brazile and was like, he says, I think he asked her if she lied in her book or something like that, or if she was lying about the documents from where she got fired for passing the question. And she was like, you're being a bully, young man, or something to that effect. And he just was like, kept asking her the question. Maybe Joe Biden remembers him from that. I don't know. But, take it as a kiss on the ego to some degree that you're known well enough that they need to not let you ask a question. This is another one of Joe Biden. And I'm going to say this now. The next person that tells me Joe Biden is more electable is going to get slapped. Now, I am being hyperbolic on that, and no, I'm not going to necessarily slap anybody, but that's how I feel. You cannot tell me at this point that this man is more electable. Joe Biden has been getting bullied on Social Security. Why? Because Joe Biden made a hit video of Bernie Sanders lying about his record, meaning lying about Joe Biden's own record on Social Security. Joe Biden has been out there trying to cut Social Security for years. And now, when somebody points that out, he's like, no, he's lying about my record. He's lying about my record. Joe Biden flagrantly lied about Social Security in this election cycle. But that's just it, right? I haven't been paying attention to Joe Biden over the course of his career. And so I'm somewhat shocked by the amount of lying that took place, just casual lying. Like Trump might be making these big lies, but Joe Biden would just make these casual lies. Like, no, he's lying about my record on Social Security. I demand an apology. It's like, what? The fuck are you talking about? They're videos. You're on TV, dude. This is not a 90s campaign where there's no internet and where there's no interconnectedness in regards to pulling up the media and the content. Maybe he doesn't know that. And if he doesn't know that, that's one more reason he should not be exceeding out of the primary. The civil rights thing, I think, bugs me more than anything else. Lying about being part of the civil rights movement. How do I know he was lying about it? You can read it in his book. He's very clear that he was not a part of it. He was just feeling it like other people because he was living in that time. Because he's been losing support, there's been a 17-point swing in some of these polls to Sanders from a demographic that Sanders had not gotten this entire race. Meaning the older you got, the less Sanders support he would get. And what you found within this last fight over the Social Security issue was that people 50, I think to like 64, it started to move to Sanders. Now, keep in mind, Sanders has been breaking even with Biden and recently has been going past him without that support. Meaning some of the surge that you're seeing probably has to do with the fact that Joe Biden lost that fight on Social Security and people could see that he was flagrantly lying. When Sanders put out his video, Sanders put out Joe Biden's own words in the video to make it very clear that Joe Biden was lying about not wanting to cut it. Take a look at this. This is what Joe Biden's campaign has been forced into. And I have to be honest, if you look at this and you tell me, yes, that's the guy I want, you could ask Bernie Sanders any fucking question in the world and he would answer that question. He would answer it honestly, straightforwardly. Integrity is a weapon. And one of those things and one of the reasons it's so difficult to hit him is because the typical ways of attacking a politician don't work. Most politicians glad hand. They tell you, whatever they need to do to get from point A to point B. They make up excuses, all this other stuff. And because they do that and they're not tethered to any kind of ideological bearing, well, you can attack that. You can look back in time and say, well, he said this here, and now he's saying this now. It is difficult to do that with Sanders because he's been saying the same fucking thing. Consistency is a weapon. I guess I'm making the point that having some moral core is indeed a weapon when you're engaging people because you don't have to try to figure out what you said in the past and that stuff can't be used against you if you're just consistent with what you believe. You argue your case full-throatedly because it burns in you. There's a difference in those things from the standpoint of a normal politician. It makes the guy harder to hit. But what about Biden? At this point, he has the lie to cover up the last 40 years of his life, much of which is on video. Do you want a politician that can answer a question, yay or nay? And if the guy can't answer a question, why are you going to put him in the general?
Mr. Biden, just a clarification on Social Security, your record from earlier.
A little bit of an answer.
Issue out of it.
For you.
What is this?
All right, Mr. Vice President, do you think Bernie Sanders would be a risk for the party?
Write it up for you, so you knew.
Just so we're clear, what you just saw, Joe Biden, what's your record on Social Security? Fortunately, Joe Biden didn't put his hands on him. I suppose the guy's lucky about that. He didn't poke him, he didn't punch him, he didn't hit him. He didn't try to intimidate him like a mob boss. So fair enough. But what you just saw was a person who's running for president of the United States, when asked the question, gets a newsletter and says, here. And the guy's like, what's this? Are you going to answer my question? Turns around. I wrote it up for you. Meaning somebody on his staff wrote these talking points, so I'm just going to give you the talking points. I'm not going to try to do the talking myself, because I've been fucking up doing that. So here, just, here's the paper. You can just read it. I've never seen that first. I've never seen that. I have never ever seen that in the history of politics. Maybe at some point when you didn't have TV, radio, and all this other stuff. More apropos, do you want a presidential candidate that can answer questions? That is sad and pathetic. Sad, sad, sad. Do not tell me that this man who can't answer questions is more electable. Don't do that. Don't do that. Trump, whatever you want to think of him, can lie his way through questions. But the very point that he's answering the questions, even if he's lying, he's still one up on Joe. Don't ask me questions, bro. Biden. That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. And I don't mean that phenomenal in a good way, just phenomenally bad. That man cannot get through the primary. That man cannot get through the primary. And I'm saying that not because he can't get through, meaning, yes, he could win this. I'm saying all powers at everyone's disposal needs to be to stop him from getting through the primary. He will lose. He will lose. He is Hillary. He is John Kerry. He is Al Gore. He will lose. He is exactly like the other 3 Democrats that lost. Think back. Al Gore lost. He's a centrist, a moderate. We need a moderate. We need a moderate. Everybody needs a moderate. You know who needs a moderate? Everyone who you see on television. Every one of them. Everyone in your news media, many of the actors, millionaires. Those people are millionaires. The people who pay them are billionaires. Now, when a network hires a person, a network is hiring a person who they, for all intents and purposes, know what they're going to say. They're not going to hire somebody that's going to say something against their own personal interests of the network. Why would they do that? All networks function this way. Every last one of them. They're not going to do stories, not necessarily because somebody forbade those stories on, let's say, I don't know, something that one of the parent corporations is doing that's, poisoning the water or something. They're not going to do that story. The story on income inequality, they're not going to do that story like talking about. Because those aren't things they care about. But when they hire the person, they know that. Chuck Todd, all of these other people, they have a framing of the world that is already known when they got that job. Now, that could be good, that could be bad. Especially, let me put it this way. All of these guys are millionaires and billionaires. Issues of class are not going to come up because it's not in their interest to come up. They're human beings that have a certain point of view. That particular point of view is in line with the network's point of view. When Chuck Todd or when many of these other people are doing their stories, the things that the public care about are not necessarily the things that they're talking about on news. Understand what I mean by this. The general public are not millionaires and billionaires. They have concerns, and those concerns are not the same concerns of the media outlets that is projecting information to them. Meaning the media is given a particular narrative of the world and a framing of the world. In their head, we need a moderate. Yeah, they need a moderate because it's in their best interest to get a moderate. That's not the same thing as the general public. And for years, the only apparatus that the public had to deal with was effectively millionaires and billionaires telling them what the world is and what they need to understand of the world in a particular framing. And then you get internet, you get these other distributed sources of information, and it starts to break. It starts to break politically because people realize they were being fucked over, despite what the media was telling them. And as these different sources of information, people could critique, criticize. They could find out the real information. They can come up with different narratives and different perspectives of the world. That was something that was not allowed prior. And because that wasn't allowed prior, and because it's been somewhat disruptive, they've now tried to go after it, i.e. Elizabeth Warren hitting sources of information that they don't particularly like. You need competitive sources of narratives because reality is not necessarily an absolute. Governments lie. Their own governments lie. Media is complicit in those lies because they just carry them like stenographers. The fact that journalists supposedly need a fact checker should tell you something. It's disturbing that fact checkers even exist. Because if you have news, you would think that that would be their jobs. Not so much. I work at Sputnik. And I work there because my point of view cannot get expressed in mainstream media. Meaning, me making the point that Donald Trump is stealing the oil. I could say that at Sputnik. I can't say that at any of the other networks. Nor would you hear it in other networks, even though that is literally what is taking place. The UN report that is making the point that the chemical weapons strike didn't take place, that these guys were being bullied. I can't say that on any other network. I can say that on Sputnik. I would like to be adversarial to the media that is currently afoot because it aggravates the shit out of me. And my post at Sputnik allows me to do that. By the same token, you ask the question, what is the point of view of the various people who are in these media outlets that are all millionaires that are working for a particular corporation paid by billionaires? What will be their point of view and framing of the world? And will your point of view as just somebody who's trying to make ends meet going to be the same as that millionaire? I'm telling you, it is not. It is not. They scream that they need a moderate only because they need a moderate. They're setting a narrative. They're imposing a narrative upon the population. That's different than what the population would actually want. It is manufacturing consent in a way. CNN just buried one of the polls in Iowa. They buried that poll, I strongly suspect, because they know if the trend persists, that Sanders is going to be far up in that poll, and Joe Biden's position in that poll may be horrendous, or Buttigieg's position may be horrendous, but the last thing they want to show is Sanders surging in that particular poll. Why? Why won't you show a poll? If polls are innocuous in the way that they come out, just show it, right? But the catch is polls are not innocuous. They are imposing a particular point of view on the population. The population is not... People don't look at this stuff and make up their own minds all the time. Sometimes people look at the one who's in the lead and they lump in with the people who are in the lead. They may even say, well, yeah, this person is more support. That person has a better chance. Those things matter. That's why people get so pissed off when people are fucking around with the polls in order to come up with skewed results. All right, I'm going to end this because at this point I'm bitching. I have a few other shows to come up with, but certainly you cannot choose a guy who can't answer questions. And if it's gotten to that point where he's just handing out pamphlets, and this is after him avoiding questions for like a month, there's something wrong with the candidate. That guy cannot be the one to go up against Trump. The next person who's probably going to float up is Bloomberg. I don't see Buttigieg floating up. Socialist versus a capitalist. You're going to see this weird sociological project of manpower versus cash. Personally, that's the fight I kind of want to see. Because ultimately, he is representative of the Democratic Party. I would even say more than Joe Biden. And in being a representative of that Democratic Party, I mean, after all, he got into the race for the explicit aim of stopping Sanders. He wants to get his hands dirty, get your hands dirty. In this case, Sanders and his entire argument that he's pitched has been against Bloomberg. Not him specifically, but his class. So a representative of the class stands up. Why would I hate that? It's fucked up that the DNC is rigging the system to allow the debates to take place. Now, if you got to a point where everybody else was out of the race, it was only two people, Sanders and Bloomberg, then fair enough. But this is wrong. This is wrong. You've excluded so many people using those guidelines, and then you're going to remove the guidelines, and enough so for Bloomberg to get in. But you didn't let Tulsi in, you didn't let Booker in, you didn't let Castro in, Marianne Williamson, you didn't let her in. All of these people who would have still been in the race, they might have fallen out of the race at a certain point when they realized the support wasn't there for them, were just cut out slightly arbitrarily, but definitely with a certain amount of intent. And now you've let him in after $325,000 donation. Yeah, totally above board. Totally above board. Keep it classy, DNC. Like, share, subscribe.